astrology and personality quizzes just as much as the next girly. And one of my favorite things to come across on my For You page are those posts that recommend things based on your zodiac sign or give you like an image or a vibe for every sign. I love those. I repost them. They are addictive. And I also think it's pretty fun to get book recommendations for your zodiac sign. So I thought that I would contribute to that and provide a couple of my own suggestions for each zodiac sign. So without further ado, let's jump into my recommendations for your astrological sign. Okay, so starting with the first astrological sign, that is Aries. And Aries people are born between March 21st and April 19th. So my first recommendation for you if you're an Aries is Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez. So this is a short story collection by an Argentine author. This is translated. It implores the supernatural, Argentine folklore and history. It's full of black magic and disturbing disappearances. And it is probably my favorite horror short story collection. So according to the internet, Aries are determined, ambitious, and passionate. I obviously thought of the fire reference for this book, but also this book is very determined and passionate and really takes on commentary on politics with righteous anger and strength. It's forceful and raw, and it demands attention and action, just like I associate with Aries. So obviously fire sign coded, but I do think that this one would work really well with an Aries because it has that kind of raw determination and passion that we associate with Aries. My second recommendation for Aries is Bunny by Mona Awad. So Bunny is a campus novel turned spooky and insane. It follows Samantha, and she is in an MFA program, and the other students in her cohort are all very cliquey and call each other Bunny. And as she begins to discover their world and become a part of their group, things really descend into madness, and we really get to see how far the creative process will go. It's a really fun and weird book, and one of the quintessential weird girl horror books. The reason I picked this for Aries is because Aries are known to be impulsive, bold, and assertive. And to me, the voice in this book is sharp, emotionally extreme, and reactive. And the book overall explores ideas of the depth of female rage, desire, belonging, and loneliness. But it is a very bold, assertive, and impactful story. And I think that that vibe fits really well with an Aries. So I think either of these books are perfectly suited for an Aries. Okay, next up is Taurus. Tauruses were born between April 20th and May 20th. I am a Taurus, that is my sun sign. So my first pick for a Taurus is The Overstory by Richard Powers. So this book is a love letter to the natural world, and it talks about trees and has many timelines that revolve around trees that were very impactful to these people's lives. And over the course of the book, we see all of these separate timelines weave together to create one larger narrative. It moves throughout history and touches on many different life experiences and people's connection with trees throughout time. It's hard to explain individual plot lines, you just kind of have to read it, but that is the overall vibe. So the reason I picked this for a Taurus is because we're known to be stable, rooted, patient, resilient, and loyal. And all of those things really remind me of a tree. I've always felt very connected to the natural world, and the idea of being rooted is something that I connect with a lot, and I think other Tauruses do as well. So what better book than a book all about trees? So with the patience aspect, The Overstory has kind of a slow burn situation, and it is a longer book, so you have to be a little bit patient. It really rewards your patience with aesthetic beauty and sensuality and a feeling of connection. So I think that this book is really well suited for a Taurus. And my second recommendation for a Taurus is a little bit more broad. It is basically anything by Mary Oliver, but I have specifically read and loved Felicity, though I have read quite a few of her other poems. So the reason I chose this one for a Taurus is that we are known to be sensual, tactile, calm, and grounded. And to me, Mary Oliver's work is really steeped in this idea of the tangible world. She really honors the physical body and nature through her work. And her poems are something that you experience with many senses. They're very rich, they're very tactile, and she sort of helps you fall into this non-judgmental relationship with your body and nature and how those things interact. It is very Taurus coded to me. So if you're a Taurus and you're willing to give poetry a try, Mary Oliver is my favorite poet, and she is just an incredible artist, and I think that both of these books are very well suited for Taurus. Okay, next up we have Gemini. Geminis were born between May 21st and June 20th, and my first recommendation if you are a Gemini is All's Well by Mona Awad. So this is an absolute fever dream of a book, and it follows a woman named Miranda who is experiencing debilitating chronic pain and addiction, and she is a theater director at a college, and she's trying to put on All's Well That Ends Well. Everyone else wants to put on Macbeth, and she's having a really hard time wrangling her students while dealing with this debilitating illness. We really see reality splinter off in this one. We can't tell what is in her head and what is real. It's a really great look at chronic pain, but also it is very much a book about theater. So the imagery that we kind of get for Gemini are the twins. So there's this idea of duality, and Geminis also kind of usually get a bad rep for being a little bit crazy or two-faced. So in a way, the theatrical elements of this do feel Gemini coded to me, but the reason I chose it is more so because Geminis are usually considered to be funny, versatile, perceptive, and clever. And the writing of this book feels very clever to me. It also explores the tension between comedy and tragedy, which feels very Gemini coded to me. And in terms of this idea of the duality of the twins, it explores this tension between comedy and tragedy, reality and delusion, and outer persona and inner suffering. It's witty, playful, chaotic, and ironic, and that feels super Gemini to me. So if you're a Gemini, read All's Well. And my second recommendation for Gemini is Cultish by Amanda Montell. This is about the language of cults and fanaticism. So Montell is a linguist, and she talks about language and how language can be cultish. So yes, she talks about real cults, but she also talks about some of the kind of mundane things that we are a part of that employ some of the same linguistic tactics that cults use. So this is one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. And the reason that I picked it for Geminis is that they are known to be inquisitive, intellectual, and skeptical. And it seems like nonfiction specifically surrounding something that we need to be cautious of or need to be aware of or skeptical of, that seems to fit really well. And this one also kind of highlights that duality that I talked about earlier, talking about the dualities that exist in cults between belonging and control, freedom and restriction, and truth versus deception. This is a funky and different type of nonfiction, and I think that that suits Gemini really well. So both of these are really great and funky picks for Gemini, so if you're Gemini, you should read them. Okay, the next sign is Cancer, and Cancers were born between June 21st and July 22nd. So my first recommendation for Cancer is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. So this is a memoir, and it focuses on grief and the loss of Michelle Zauner's mother. It focuses heavily on their relationship and her Korean identity. So a lot of this book is spent talking about food and how food is a source of connection for her and her mother, and also between her and her cultural heritage. It's lyrical, it's raw, it's honest, and it is one of my favorite memoirs of all time. So there are some stereotypes about Cancer that may or may not be true, but the ones that I'm thinking of for this book are that Cancers are emotional, sensitive, and tender. And those aren't bad stereotypes. That's just what people associate Cancer with, and I'm rolling with that. This is a very sad and emotional book, but also extremely tender and vulnerable. And I think that it is a great pick for Cancers because they will find themselves connecting deeply with this story and with Zauner's experience. They may be crying quite a bit, though I think a lot of us are, even if we're not Cancers. So the book deals with grief, it deals with mother-daughter relationship dynamics. And fun fact, Cancers are ruled by the moon, and the moon has a lot to do with maternal relationships. So that's a fun tie-in and a good thing to explore for Cancers. So my first recommendation for Cancers is Crying in H Mart. Okay, my second recommendation for Cancers is Hysteria by Jessica Gross. So this one follows an unnamed main character, and it is a bit of a trip. So she is on a out-of-control bender in Brooklyn, and at a bar she thinks she sees Sigmund Freud. And that turns into a little bit of a stalking situation where she is trying to find Freud again and talk to him. And with the help of this enigmatic Freud, she starts to untangle her relationship with her father and her parents in general, and how her experience with them relate to her sexual experience. So the reason that I chose this is because Cancers are known to be moody, introspective, reflective and intuitive. And this one is a very moody and introspective book. This character has a hardened shell, and the book kind of explores the tenderness that lies beneath that. And it does this through concepts of memory, desire, and unresolved childhood traumas. The book is immersive and tactile and mimics a Cancer's inner voice. It's definitely a weird woman book, and it is a bit chaotic and crazy, but totally worth the read if you like that type of book. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I think it's a great recommendation for Cancer. So those are my 2 recommendations for Cancer. Okay, let's move on to my recommendations for Leo. Leos are born between July 23rd and August 22nd, and my first recommendation for a Leo is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. And the book follows a photographer named Irina who obsessively takes photos of men who she has cast to model for her. And she's on sabbatical from her dead-end bar job, and she's offered a spot to be in a gallery in London. So she promises to revive her career and sort of get out of this drug-induced rut that she's in. And things get pretty bad and self-destructive from there. She's a pretty unlikable main character. However, that doesn't mean that Leos are unlikable. Some of the more negative qualities that Leos are sometimes associated with are being self-centered and dramatic. However, they're also magnetic and passionate. So while this book portrays this main character in a negative way and she is objectively toxic, this character feels very Leo coded to me in that she is self-centered, but she's also magnetic and driven and passionate in her own way. The book explores toxic relationships and bodily autonomy, and the idea of reclaiming control through a narrator who's unfiltered, intense, and unapologetic about what she wants. So while this might feel like a more negative portrayal about what a Leo is, I do think that it's a very fun book and kind of has that over-the-top magnetic energy that you expect from a Leo. So that is my first recommendation for Leo. And my second recommendation for Leo is Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn. So this controversial writer named Astrid, who lives in LA, attempts to revive her career and also find true love. This book is an homage to 1950s lesbian pulp fiction, and Astrid is a little bit obsessive, a little bit toxic, a little bit chaotic, and really leans on her vices from drugs to sex. But the book offers characters who don't shy away from complexity and showcases the blend of strength and vulnerability that we all have. It explores raw and intense emotions around love and desire. The reason that I picked this book for Leo is that Leos are known to be bold, unapologetic, complex, sensual, and big-hearted. So this book feels like an unapologetic look at femininity, obsession, love, and loss. And it's complex. It showcases the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's also sensual and tactile and rich in that way. So I think that this one is very well suited for a Leo. So both the main characters in these books are complex, and the books play with feminine rage and loneliness and desire. And I hope you don't read too far into the fact that these characters can be a bit problematic. Those are just the types of books that I read. So those are my recommendations for Leo. Okay, next up we have Virgo. Virgos were born between August 23rd and September 22nd. And my first recommendation for a Virgo is Days of Distraction by Alexandra Chang. Our unnamed main character in this story is working at a tech publication. She's 24 and she has a boyfriend named Jay who she's getting ready to move across the country for. He's in medical school and has the opportunity to move from California to Ithaca, New York. And she has to decide whether she wants to go with him. And she decides to. And from there we kind of get all of the internal processes and things that she is feeling and experiencing from this change and loss of identity, this feeling of loss of control, and the questions that she has about what she is doing with her life and her fulfillment. It also talks quite a bit about interracial relationships and her experience with being an Asian American. It also explores disillusionment with media, capitalism, relationships, and whiteness. And it does all of this through a narrator whose gaze is exacting, self-aware, and sometimes dry. So the reason that I picked Days of Distraction for a Virgo is that Virgos are known to be analytical, thoughtful, observant, perfectionistic, and self-critical. When I read this for the first time, I thought that her voice just sounded so quintessentially Virgo to me. She is very perfectionistic, she's very observant, and she spends a lot of her time having her own internal processes rather than processing with other people. She also cares a lot about being a good person and doing the right thing, and Virgos have a very strong desire to do what is right and correct. So this is just a situation where this character feels so Virgo coded to me that I could not include it. And it's one of my favorite books. Okay, and my other pick for Virgos is Breasts and Eggs by Miko Kawakami. So this book follows two sisters. One is trying to decide whether she ever wants to have children, and the other has a young daughter who is sort of contending with her puberty and feeling really uncomfortable in her body. And the first sister, Makiko, kind of goes on this exploration and journey and talks to many people about their perspective on whether or not she should have children and their experiences with parenthood or not being a parent. And we follow her along this path as she is trying to make up her mind because she feels like she's running out of time. And on the flip side, her sister Natsuko is on the path to getting breast implants, and her daughter is really struggling with that, along with struggling with getting her period and the changes in her body, and just really hating the idea of becoming a woman and all of the things that come with that. So it really is a deep and thoughtful exploration of womanhood through all of these different angles. It's a deeply feminist novel and has some of that feminine rage that comes across as well. It dives into these topics with quiet intensity, which I think is a very Virgo thing. And it also explores the tension between personal values and the social pressure that is put on women. And I think that that is also very Virgo. The reason I picked it is because Virgos are known to be introspective, emotionally restrained, overthinkers, and also concerned with the body, which was one of the main reasons why I picked this. It is a book that is very much about the body, but it's also about the social experience of being a woman, which I think is related to that Virgo desire to really think through things and understand people's experiences. And it is a quiet and emotionally restrained book, which I also think feels very Virgo. So that is my second recommendation if you are a Virgo. Okay, next up we have Libra. Libras were born between September 23rd and October 22nd. And my first recommendation, if you are a Libra, is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. So this one comes from multiple perspectives and we follow several characters. The main character is Amira, and she's a babysitter for an affluent white family. She is Black, and she's apprehended at the grocery store one night when she is babysitting, and she's accused of kidnapping this white child. Somebody actually records this experience, which becomes a huge plot point throughout the book. And our other main character is the mom of the children that Amira babysits. Her name is Alix, and she is a stereotypical white feminist. She keeps trying to connect with Amira and help her, and Amira's having none of it. And then tension builds throughout this book as Amira becomes close to the man who recorded this whole event, and we find out how Alix also knows him. But the book does explore performative allyship very heavily, as well as the messy dynamics of privilege. It peels back the layers of how people perform goodness, allyship, motherhood, and feminism, and it sort of presents the different sides with ethical ambiguity, prompting us to draw our own conclusions about who is right and who is wrong. The reason why this fits for Libra is because Libras are known to be the justice-oriented sign. They're concerned with social codes, ethics, and fairness, and also afraid of judgment, which is something that comes up quite a bit in this book. This book is all about ethics and justice and right and wrong. And I think that Libras will eat this up because it is just the type of story that they can dig into. So that is my first recommendation. And my other recommendation is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. So this one follows a couple, Celestial and Roy, and they're newlyweds, and they're spending a night in a hotel on the way to visit Roy's parents. But during their stay at this hotel, Roy is accused of a crime that he did not commit, and he's actually incarcerated for it. So most of the novel sort of takes place during his incarceration and explores their relationship over this period of time. This book is about racism and false accusations. It's about incarceration in America. And on the relationship side, it's about commitment, emotional responsibility, betrayal, and forgiveness when it comes to both romantic relationships and friendships. It also touches on the intersection between personal and systematic injustice. This is a very rich and nuanced book. It is a love story. It's a story about race in America. America. It has all of those kind of justice-related themes that Libras will just eat up. Libras are justice-seeking, they are empathetic, and they are committed. And this book does talk a lot about commitment in relationships and the toll that that commitment can take when one person is incarcerated. It is a fantastic and heart-wrenching book, and I think it's a great pick for Libra. Okay, we're moving right along. Next up, we have Scorpio, and Scorpios were born between October 23rd and November 21st. My first recommendation for Scorpio is Tender as the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. This is a dystopian novel from an Argentine writer. It's translated, and it tells the story of a dystopian world where meat is no longer safe to consume. All animals have this virus, and the government essentially sanctions eating people. So humans are farmed and eaten, and that is legal, and that is what everybody is doing. It is a haunting and gruesome look at capitalism, greed, and government control, and our agriculture system. It's a bold and disturbing novel that dares to ask what is left of the soul when the system takes everything. It employs eroticism and horror to facilitate transformation and forces readers to confront the monstrous things inside of us all. This is one of the most grotesque and body horror filled books that I have read, so just be warned about that. But the reason that I picked this one for Scorpios is that Scorpios are sometimes known to be fascinated by sex, death, control, power, and the grotesque, and can be more capable of holding all of those things and dealing with the nuances of them than other signs. So this one is very dark and disturbing, and I think would really captivate Scorpio's attention. And my other recommendation for Scorpio is Monstrilio by Gerardo Sermano Cordova. This is a wild ride. It follows Magos, who is a grieving mother who just lost her son to a disease, and she decides to cut a piece of his lung out and keep it. And she begins to feed this piece of lung, and it turns into a monster. The book bounces around in perspective between her husband, her best friend, and Monstrilio, who is the creature that results from this lung. And it is a meditation on grief and creation and the monstrous side of love and loyalty. The book does not hide from the grotesque horror that grief creates, and it blurs love and monstrosity in a beautiful way. It's emotionally raw and morally complex, and demonstrates the ways in which grief can be transformational. The reason that I picked this for Scorpio is that Scorpios are known to be devoted, passionate, intense, and unafraid to examine the darkest parts of human nature, and Monstrilio does all of that. Magos and her husband are endlessly devoted to their son and Monstrilio, and it showcases how much pain that they will go through to maintain this relationship. It is one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read, and I think that Scorpios would absolutely devour this. Okay, next up we have Sagittarius. Sagittarii were born between November 22nd and December 21st. My first recommendation for this one is Nevada by Imogen Binnie. This book follows Maria, and she is almost 30 and working at a bookstore in New York City, and she's living with her girlfriend Steph, and things are not going super well between them. And Maria's doing okay until they break up, and she's sort of thrown into a tailspin. And Maria's trans, and she sort of becomes this role model to this younger person who is possibly trans. Maria is convinced that they are, but she is sort of falling apart after this breakup and spiraling, and she decides to take a road trip to try and find herself. So the book is about a woman on the brink, both socially and philosophically. She's messy, she's brave, she's honest, and she's in search of her own truth and a way to make her external and internal lives fit together. The reason I picked this for Sagittarius is that Sagittarii are open-minded, adventurous, impulsive, and idealistic. In the story, our main character is very impulsive, very idealistic. She really wants her internal and external worlds to fit together, which is something that's really important to Sagittarius. And it's also kind of a road trip situation, and Sagittarius are known to be the travelers of the astrological signs. So I think that this one would be a really, really good fit for a Sagittarius. And my other recommendation for Sagittarius is All Fours by Miranda July. So this book follows a middle-aged woman, and she is a semi-famous artist. She's also a a mom and wife, and she decides that she really needs to take a cross-country trip in order to begin writing something that she has needed to write for quite a while. However, instead of driving all the way from LA to New York, she gets off the highway after 20 minutes and decides to spend her entire trip in a motel. And she creates this perfect environment. She gets decorators in to make the motel room exactly what she wants it to be. She creates this kind of utopian space for herself where she is able to relax and just think about who she wants to be and who she is. She's also exploring intimacy with other people besides her husband. And the book really focuses on subverting expectations of what we expect a woman to be, specifically a 45-year-old mother and wife. The book subverts the road trip story by actually keeping the character close to home, where she's able to consider how to expand beyond the roles that she's been given. So this is a perfect Sagittarius book because it is also a road trip book, or a subversion of the road trip idea. This star sign is in search of meaning. They are curious, restless, and rebellious, which fits perfectly with the character in the story. It's a weird one, but I think that Sagittarius can really handle the weirdness and will really connect with the exploration of the self and subverting expectations of the roles that you've been given. So those are my recommendations for Sagittarius. Okay, next up we have Capricorn. Capricorns are born between December 22nd and January 19th. And my first recommendation for Capricorn is this one. This is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This one has made its rounds all over social media. This one is about our unnamed main character, and she and 40 other women are below ground in this bunker, and she's never lived anywhere else that she can remember. And the women are patrolled by these guards who are all men. And when the novel opens, we are sort of experiencing her coming of age, her interest in men for the first time, and sort of unsureness of who she is and not remembering anything before this. She's a very unique and specific voice, and she is completely different than the other women in that she has no context of life before. So all of her opinions and feelings and thoughts are informed only by this specific environment and these specific women. And one day, a massive alarm sounds as one of the guards is unlocking their cell. The key is still in the lock, and they all leave, and the women are able to escape. And when they do, they go out into the world to try to discover if there are any other people and what is out there. They sort of create this utopian society together and build these really strong relationships. This book is genre defying. It is somewhere between dystopia and science fiction, but it also has a literary fiction feel. It is a fascinating book. It examines the psychological toll of solitude in a very quiet manner. It demonstrates resilience, self-reliance, and the existential weight of creating meaning. The reason I picked it for Capricorn is that Capricorns are known to be independent, determined, and stoic. All of those traits fit perfectly into who this character is. So I think that Capricorn specifically would really identify with this and would find it really fascinating. My second recommendation for Capricorn is this one. This is Exit Interview by Christy Coulter. This is a memoir as well, and this one follows Coulter's experience working at Amazon corporate. It talks a lot about the stress and the crazy environment at Amazon, and it sheds light on a lot of the toxicity at Amazon, specifically as it relates to her career progression as a woman and the way that she was treated. And the way that it's written is very no nonsense, but it's also really funny and witty. There were so many moments in this where I laughed out loud, and it sort of showcases what happens when a career-based identity begins to crack. This one works really well for Capricorn because Capricorns are known to be career-driven people, as well as being responsible and practical. This being a book about career really fits in with Capricorn, but also the fact that Capricorns are practical, and this is really written in a no-nonsense way. So I think that this is a great choice for a Capricorn. Apologies, my battery died. This is a very long video. But our second to last sign is Aquarius. Aquarii were born between January 20th and February 18th. And my first recommendation is The Story of Jane by Laura Kaplan. This is a nonfiction book that speaks about the underground abortion service that happened in the 60s and 70s. It's about the group of women who selflessly helped many, many women get abortions during this time. And it's a really fascinating look at this period of history and what these women endured. It's a real story about a group who embodied social change, collective action, and rebellion against oppression. The women in this book are deeply practical and methodical, mission-driven, and able to balance idealism with strategy. The reason why I love this book for Aquarius is that Aquarii are humanitarian in nature. They're also rebellious, idealistic, energetic, and independent. I really equate social change with Aquarius and this strong drive to help people and to achieve a better society. And that can come with a lot of idealism, but it also comes with a lot of drive and passion for change. So I think that this is a great nonfiction book for Aquarius. And my other recommendation for Aquarius is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a short story collection that combines many different elements. It demolishes borders between psychological realism, science fiction, comedy, horror, and the fantastical. Each story has to do with women and our bodies, autonomy, desire, and the self. It's a non-conforming narrative that reinvents form and rejects convention. Through its characters and storytelling, this book critiques and destabilizes patriarchal narrative. The reason I chose this one for Aquarius is because they're known to be open-minded, inventive, and boundary pushing. So to me, any book that pushes boundaries on narrative structure or on social issues is perfect for an Aquarius. You have to be a little bit open-minded to read Machado's writing, and I think that Aquariuses will really get this. So that is my second recommendation for the Aquarius sign. Okay, we have made it to the final sign, and that is Pisces. Pisces were born between February 19th and March 20th. And my first recommendation will be no surprise. It is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This book follows a woman named Lucy, and she has a pretty strong love addiction. And to get away from her toxic ex and their messed up relationship, she goes to dog sit for her sister who lives on the beach. And instead of focusing on dog sitting and her therapy group, she continues to look for love. And one day she meets a merman on the beach and begins a crazy relationship with him. This book is deeply surreal. It's romantic, messy, and emotionally raw. Lucy is a very unlikable main character. So it's a very raw story of a woman who is really just looking for love and struggling with herself. It explores themes of longing, fantasy, escapism, and self-destruction. The reason I picked this one, other than the title, is because Pisces are known to be dreamy, intuitive, sensitive, idealistic, reclusive, and seekers of escapism. I had such a hard time narrowing down my picks for Pisces because Pisces are one of my favorite signs, even though they're not really in my chart very much, but also because I think a lot of books that I read fall into this surreal, dreamy kind of aesthetic or vibe. But I think that this one, besides just it being called The Pisces, is a great example of that type of story. And I think it would be very impactful for a Pisces. Okay, and my final recommendation for this video for Pisces is Open Throat by Henry Hoke. So this is a pretty weird one, but it's very short and easy to get through, and it follows a mountain lion. And this mountain lion is discovering humans and trying to understand the dynamics of human relationships. They're all on their own, don't have any other family, so they're just sort of trying to connect and understand humans. But when a fire engulfs the area where this mountain lion lives, they have to travel into the main part of LA, and they get tied up with someone who is really interested in keeping them. And it sort of asks the question of, does this mountain lion want to eat a person or become one? So this is a marvel of storytelling. It is so much fun. It is a deeply queer novel that explores themes of identity and community. And I really just love this perspective of a mountain lion. I think it was so fascinating. And I immediately loved it. It was a 5-star read and I just became obsessed with it. It truly is a dreamy and aching meditation on loneliness, survival, identity, and queerness. And it sort of has a stream of consciousness vibe. It feels very fragmented. There really aren't any punctuations through this book, so it doesn't really feel like it has borders. It just feels very stream of consciousness to me. It almost feels like a poem, and that sort of does contribute to this surreal feeling and this kind of airiness that it has. And so the reason I picked that for Pisces, if you can't tell already, is that Pisces are artistic, emotional, wise, imaginative, and empathetic. And this is a deeply imaginative and empathetic work, and also super artistic. I just think that this totally embodies who Pisces are. So that is my final recommendation for Pisces. Okay, we made it. Those are all of my recommendations for your astrological sign. Obviously, you can read any of these books and they're all great books, but you can start with your sun sign, and if you're really into astrology, you can check out the book recommendations for your moon and your rising sign. And hopefully you like these recommendations and they're well suited to you. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.